Unlike other video game genres, survival horror relies first and foremost on atmosphere and building tension. These games aren't about defeating hordes of enemies or high scores, instead they're about enduring, persevering, managing resources, and overcoming overwhelming odds. Which actually sounds really nice and inspiring until you think that, basically, the goal is just to run away from the terrifying abomination hunting you down to wear your skin as a dress and try not to cry in the process. Looking at the most industry-walloping releases of this genre then, I'm Ash from What Culture Gaming, and these are 8 important video games that define survival horror. 8. Sweet Home. One of the big bad influences behind the original Resident Evil, Sweet Home revolves around a group of documentary filmmakers trapped inside a haunted mansion by a ghost. You know, the usual supernatural terrors coming to end human life and all that, and is based on a Japanese film of the same name. However, unlike other games of the time, if any of the characters die, you can't crack open a Vicks vapor rub under their nose and revive them. This means that the difficulty greatly depends on your own ability to keep each individual member of your team from being disemboweled, cut in half, strangled, or just more generally bludgeoned to death by something heavy. Your choice. Tense and well designed, Sweet Home is probably one of the greatest forerunners to survival horror, not to mention a completely underrated gem of a NES game, and was one of the first in defining a genre. Just don't believe that there's anything sweet about this home. 7. Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation may have just helped convince publishers that survival horror isn't merely a niche, but rather an untapped, possibly lucrative genre that's been overwhelmingly ignored by an otherwise online-obsessed industry. The sales of Alien Isolation were encouraging to say the least for modern-day iterations of proper survival horror, earmarking it as one of the scariest games, well, ever. Nothing quite beats trying to sneak past a xenomorph that wants nothing more than to tear you limb from limb as you desperately try to escape. Tapping into the 1970s roots of the original movie in a way that nothing of the franchise has ever done since, Alien Isolation is truly the standard to beat, and a reminder of what these types of games can really be if they work hard enough. 6. Clock Tower. Developed and published by Human Entertainment back in 1995, Clock Tower is a point-and-click survival horror game in which players take on the role of a young girl left to fend for herself against a disfigured, murderous psychopath known only as the Scissor Man, who surprisingly is a man with some big-ass scissors. In each room you can mess with whatever's lying around, but be warned, most of it actually conceals the stalking monster himself, hiding behind drapes, inside closets, or behind shower curtains. And you don't want to get chopped up by his giant weapon, all euphemisms aside. Not only was Clock Tower a groundbreaking entry into the survival horror genre, it was also the first point-and-click game to feature an antagonist that, much to Professor Layton's annoyance, would actively stalk the player even during puzzle sequences, making it a groundbreaking development in 2 genres respectively. 5. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Developed for PC by Frictional Games, players in Amnesia: The Dark Descent take on the role of Daniel, an amnesiac who, after awakening in an unfamiliar setting, discovers that he has deliberately erased his own memory for reasons unknown. Amnesia involves solving puzzles and attempting to avoid being discovered by monsters, alongside managing Daniel's sanity. That means don't stare monsters in their horrid faces or spend too long in the dark, which seems like common sense, but messing with the status quo results in some unsettling consequences. Not only did Amnesia: The Dark Descent sell incredibly well for an indie title, it was also positively received by critics. This game has gone on to produce a lucrative sequel, as well as amass an enormous following of die-hard fans in the process. Not bad for a game with an initial budget of just over $300,000. 4. Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. Before Amnesia, there was this. Spanning several centuries, Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem is an ambitious psychological horror which is divided between 12 playable characters, each of whom is introduced through a series of flashbacks and revolves around an ancient god attempting to manifest himself on Earth, feast on the souls of the living, and plunge the planet into a state of eternal darkness. We have a lot in common, he and I. Again, the gameplay revolves around a sanity meter which subtly alters the environment and causes random, bizarre things to occur. Some of the most popular examples include the television reverting to a blue screen, the volume being slowly lowered, and the walls in various rooms beginning to bleed. It was an ingenious system that only enriched an already awesome game, one which has been almost universally praised since its release back in 2002. Though sales were poor, Eternal Darkness has slowly cultivated a following over the years, and is often heralded as one of the most standout games from the early 2000s. 3. Silent Hill 2. Perhaps even more so than the original, Silent Hill 2 has helped define survival horror in ways that very few other games can claim. Silent Hill 2 puts players in the shoes of James Sunderland, a husband who travels to the town of Silent Hill in order to find his wife Mary, who has written to James despite having been dead for the past 3 years. Oh no. The most interesting aspect of Silent Hill is the town itself, of course, which reflects the innermost fears, anxieties and frustrations of whomever happens to be trapped within. In this case, it's obviously James. The nurses and mannequins that feature throughout the game, for example, were designed to reflect James's sexual frustrations. And Pyramid Head himself represents James's guilt as well as his subconscious desire to be punished for his wrongdoings. Though the game revolves around navigating the town, solving puzzles and overcoming obstructions, as well as managing dwindling resources and fighting enemies, it's the story that really sets Silent Hill 2 apart. 2. Alone in the Dark. Considered by many to be the forefather of the genre, Alone in the Dark revolves around the suicide of a Mr. Jeremy Hartwood, a former artist whose death is quickly dismissed by the authorities despite its mysterious circumstances. Trapped inside the mansion where Hartwood was killed, players take on the role of either Edward Carnby or Emily Hartwood, a private investigator and the niece of the deceased, respectively. The goal of the game is to escape the mansion and generally avoid being killed by the various Lovecraftian monsters that roam its corridors. Though combat is an option, the game encourages you to avoid it. There are several enemies that actually cannot be beaten, and others that are rendered less difficult by the completion of various puzzles. 1. Resident Evil. Could it really be anything else? The very first game in a series that many people would consider the quintessential survival horror franchise, Resident Evil is perhaps one of the most beloved gaming properties on the planet. Though it's arguably since forgotten its humble, Jill sandwich-filled roots, you just can't fault the very first entry in the series. It will forever stand as a testament to the game for as long as said genre continues to exist. Though the series has moved from janky polygons to stunningly rendered 3D environments, and from survival horror to whatever the hell Resident Evil 6 was, nothing will ever tarnish the memory of first entering the Spencer Mansion and encountering that very first agent of the undead. Respect your elders, my guys. This game is the OG.
The Force is with us. What Culture Star Wars is our brand new channel dedicated to all things Star Wars. We got lists, we got news, we got editorials, we've got ups and downs. We'll be covering everything to do with Star Wars, past, present, and future. It doesn't matter whether you're a prequels kind of person, an original trilogy purist, or if you just really love the sequels. If you love Star Wars, this will be a safe, positive space to come and relax, chug some blue milk, and maybe even have a death stick or two. In the meantime, it would be very droopy McCool of you if you could subscribe to the channel and follow us on social media so you don't miss any of our uploads going forward. That's all for now though. I've been Ewan, and until next time, may the Force be with you. Bye!